Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu to some of you and peace out to the rest of you. Hit the share button because the message is more important than the messenger. I want to give a shout out to the Reverend Brother Pastor Deacon Dr. Hurricane Edward Allen Anderson. In his upload about Cam Newton and Nick Cannon, and stating that they weren't really the issue, but it was the sisters, he began to cook Palestinians and other Arabs because they've been looking to black folks for solidarity. And I've addressed this before, and I will state that the relationship between black folks and Palestinians is no different than the relationship between black folks and other Arabs, with one exception. The Arabs are not immediately under the thumb of the Zionists, and I say immediately for a reason. But Palestinians are. Palestinians have been through what we've been through, but with an intensity that makes up for the fact that it's been a little under a century since they've really been going through it. We've been through roughly the same thing, but the lack of the intensity they're now experiencing was replaced by the longevity of what we experienced. That's the main difference between us with other Arabs and us with them. They've really not been supported sufficiently even by other Arabs. Black folks that have been under the thumb of colonialism or bondage do understand, because we've had the sympathy of other black folks in other places, but their ability to help has been compromised. So I'm not blaming them when they could and when they couldn't. We understand a lot of the same things, but the fact is black people understand oppressors better. One, we've been dealing with them for longer. And we tend to think that nobody else has the inferiority complex that we black folks have developed underneath the heels of white supremacy. But the fact is everybody has it. There are many people in Palestine that will marvel at the Zionists and they will say, oh, the Israelis have everything. And that's because they're so deprived in the West Bank and Gaza and other areas that used to be Palestine even before. We understand, to a certain extent, not being willing to blend in with your oppressor. Palestinians understand it, but by the same token, we also realize that there's not going to be acceptance. And that's part of why it is that many of us are looking at Kamala and saying, no. And it was very balanced what Edward Anderson did when he said, I'm not going to cape for Kamala, but why are you getting on her case when the foreign policy is not going to be any different between Trump and Kamala? As far as you are concerned, what the F is the difference between them? Why are you not jumping on Trump? Because remember, Kamala didn't do a Muslim ban, and that's not something she'd be interested in doing for the most part. If she becomes president, she'd rather do what Obama did, order drone strikes. Drone technology was more available under Obama than it was under Bush, but that's also part of why it is that Obama ordered more drone strikes. Now, did Obama want to do a ban? No, he was just like, no, I'll blow you up there. You better not fight back. Remember, it was Obama, Ben Hussein, that announced the It was him that announced that a kill team had done in Osama. So, keeping that in mind, when it comes to foreign policy, you would almost think it's not even determined by who it is that's in the White House. That's what it seems to me to be, because no matter who it is, that doesn't change. And that is one of the things that we have begun to realize, and we realized this late, but we realized it before Palestinians or any other Arab or even anyone else that's Muslim and they ain't black have come to realize it. It don't make a bloody difference who's in the White House. Black folks ain't gonna get our reparations. We're not gonna get what America owes us from Democrats or Republicans. And Palestinians are not going to get what America and Israel owe them, or Germany for that matter, owe them from Democrats, Republicans, right wing, left wing. The reason why that Zionist state was founded in the first place in that particular location is because Palestinians, you still have not understood this, but the reason is you're not white. We can sympathize with you. There's not much we can do to help, and you're not going to get very far coming and telling us that we owe you more solidarity, because our ability is compromised much like yours is. The other thing, too, is this. We don't sit up and call you any names on the basis of you being Arab, except as a reaction to you calling us slaves because we're black. You are not an exception amongst Arabs for that. Y'all do it, too. Black Palestinians are referred to as slaves. Now, they're not really beaten or harmed by non-black Palestinians. That's not the issue, but they are called slaves because they're black. And that's the end of it. That's enough right there. Sometimes a child might call a black Palestinian slave, and the mother will chide the child and say, don't do that. Don't treat them like that. Do you want God to make you like them? Man, turn me darker, God. Thank you. They still use that. Like being black is going to be a punishment, so God's going to turn you black to punish you. Really? That's not a punishment. See, let me explain this to you that are Palestinian and even other Arabs that jump on black people or that betray us or disappoint us after we've helped out at your request. When you act the way you do, without the violence, just when you differentiate treatment of black people, you actually do something that harms black people you like. You know, the ambiguous looking Negroes that you like, that you love to tell look like you, and you favor us a little bit more sometimes. Yeah, you make it rough for us because we're still black. We still got black relatives. But when we get around black folk we don't know, they don't trust us. They trust us so little. Ask me how I know. You non-black Arabs like to say stuff about black folks, even black Arabs, to the extent that when I meet a black Arab, I don't know them, but when I meet them, if they're not really fluent in English, they don't trust me. They wonder why I spoke to them sometimes. Why am I giving them the head nod? They want to know what the hell is up. Sometimes I have to get into conversations with them and find a way to work in that my people were taken from Africa into the Americas. Sometimes I'll ask them their full name in the hopes that they're going to say a name like Al-Barnawi or Al-Hawsawi or Al-Falata. And then I can tell them, oh, wow, did you hear about the people that disappeared in the 18 and 1700s? And when they say yes, I say that was us. That was when we got kidnapped and taken to the New World, to Jamaica, Brazil, the United States. That's us, bruh. We're the ones that disappeared from y'all. Sometimes they know, sometimes they don't realize that the African Americans taken away from Africa And I mean, when I say African Americans in this context, I mean diasporans in the New World, the Americas. Sometimes they don't realize that the New World black folks were taken away from their people as well. Sometimes they knew and sometimes they didn't. They know that there are black folks in the New World. They know that there were people that disappeared, but they oftentimes don't realize that the ones of them who disappeared were kidnapped and taken to the coast and then to the New World. And I have to hope that I can get this in because, in all honesty, they're leery. And it's because of the dumb shit you say. Because you don't check yourself. And then when someone corrects you about it, eventually you will accept correction. But the first time someone corrects you about it is the time to accept it. Not after they tell you, quit interrupting, let me finish this point, and then you finally let them finish. Then, oh, okay, yeah. When they first corrected you, you were supposed to say, damn, that was wrong, because you don't like it when white folks call you the T word. So how dare you call us anything you wouldn't call yourself? You know the rules of our religion. And you know that when you sit up and you try to justify singling us out to call us slaves and not slaves of God, but trying to justify it on top of doing it actually makes it worse because you're assuming that God has the same bias as you do. That's what you're assuming. Like God blessed you by not making you black. No, I've been black almost 50 years. It's a blessing until we got to be surrounded by further muckers like you. And I'm talking about the ones of you that say this stuff and the ones of you that don't challenge the elders when they say it. You need to learn to challenge those who insult black folks for being black, even if they don't think it's an insult. You need to learn to challenge them the same way you would if they said something that was blasphemous, because when they do this and they normalize it and they think it's normal, that becomes blasphemy. Thinking that some bias against black people is normal is blasphemy because you're sitting up and saying that God understands because he's biased too. Like he didn't even create you to be the least bit biased on a racial account. He didn't even give you that instinct, let alone does he have it. So when you have it, you develop it. Where did you get it from? And you're going to turn around and blame it on God, trying to justify it. Well, what do you mean it's natural? So now you're going to sit up and say God is a racist. Now that's blasphemy. You have canceled your religion. This is why I fight you so hard, even if I'm in one of your nations. It's not just about you don't want to marry one of us. I don't feel a guck. It's when you turn to somebody else that doesn't mind it and you ask them why they married one of us instead of asking the one of us why we married one of you. That's the real question. I have a right to ask any black Arab that married a white Arab, why did you marry a white Arab? You don't have a right to ask a white Arab why they married a black Arab. And I'm only saying white Arab so you know who I'm talking about. Y'all ain't white. If you were truly white, white folks wouldn't treat you the way they do. They would have, if you were truly white, even in the Levant area, they would have never established that Zionist state there where they did. They wouldn't have done it. They were talking about dropping them off in Africa, and they passed up a chance to oppress us one more time by dropping these violent Zionists off in our continent. They passed up that chance to do it to you. What does that tell you? You can be genetically anything and accept Islam, but politically speaking, you can't be white and accept Islam. And they mean that so much. That is so deeply ingrained in the minds of whites and many other people. The fact that you speak Arabic, if you are an Arab Christian, means that you can't be politically white. Now, if you move to the U.S., they want you to mark that on the census to build up their numbers and to distance you from the people that could have really helped you to adjust and resist and prepare and be in somewhat of a mitigated position something that would mitigate where you are right now. That's us black folk. And what Alan Anderson was right. Why are you not jumping on Latin Americans about the lack of solidarity? You could say, well, it's because they already see it this way. That's fine. We do too. They can't liberate you, neither can we. So where do we come back to the difference? See, they have nations, and their national governments can turn around and say, okay, we are banning dual citizenship between us and that Zionist state of Israel. They can do that. What we black folks gonna say? We don't have our own passport, except some of the Caribbean countries. And hell, when you got Caribbean countries with their own passports and they're largely black, guess what? Some non-black minority member of those nationalities is going to jump up and start talking about how it's not a black nation. This is not a black passport. Don't believe me? Some lady, I call her Miss Chin, did that in Jamaica. Trying to say that Jamaican English is not a black language. And I ripped her up, and so did them black Jamaicans. They told her, fuck the shuck up. And it's not like we didn't know how to talk till we met the Irish. We're using African languages, loan words in Jamaican English, because that's who the huck we are. Africa at the core. Yes, it's a black nation. We just didn't strip your stank behind a citizenship. And see, most Jamaicans don't have that spirit of hatred, but this is for you Arabs to understand. Since I actually have white blood, I'm capable of hatred like they are. The difference between me and a real white person is I have to be provoked to it. But when I'm provoked, I'm capable of more hatred than a purely African person of my people. Or even somebody who just has less European admixture. So when I am provoked, my hatred, though provoked, it then becomes as severe as a white person's hatred for you. It becomes equally severe. It's just the difference is I hate the ones who deserve it. And if you provoke it, I'll hate you the same way and I'll fight you the same way. I'll turn around and do worse to you because if you're Muslim, you're supposed to know better. That's treachery. That's blasphemy. I could make the KKK a secondary or tertiary priority if you're going to sit up and try to justify your bias. You know damn well when you're talking to black folks, you're largely talking about black Americans, and you know we don't control the country. We can get a few key positions as tokens. You want to act like we control the nation. No. If it was up to us, nothing would have happened to help you or to harm you because of us in the beginning. Then eventually we would have been able to get around to helping you if it was up to us. We wouldn't help somebody do these things to you. They're horrible. They're deplorable. We know that they're wrong and that you're right. But the other thing, too, is this. Those of us, especially that become Muslim, and even many non-Muslims amongst us who just know that there's something different about Islam, look at you with your smoking and you're dealing in interest. And what you're willing to sell in the United States to make $1. That you're not supposed to be selling according to the rules of your own religion. They look and they say, you sold your religion out for some dollars and some white folks' acceptance. Damn you. You can't be allies. That's what happens. So black folks that ain't Muslim, but they know you supposed to be on something better can understand this. That what you think black folks that are Muslim and have been for 2 decades or more like me are going to look at you and see. Some of you have that fighting spirit and you don't give that up. And you won't do anybody any wrong to oppress them. And those are the ones with whom we rock now. We can't liberate them. But at least we can afford to have their backs because they turn around and do the same for us. But they're also not necessarily the ones jumping on black Americans saying, why you ain't out there marching for us and why y'all voting for Kamala and all that. Man, look, for number one, black men are already tired of her. But if you're going to jump on black women, let's call a spade, all puns intended. Are you doing it because they betrayed us? Or are you doing it because they're willing to betray themselves. Either one of those would probably be valid, but no, you're doing it because you feel like they betrayed you. You don't understand. What you don't understand is that supporting Kamala for them is not really a betrayal of you because Trump ain't got your back. Understand that the harshest treatment you ever come across, not only in the United States, but in the West, is when the Republicans are controlling the states. That's when you really go through it. Patriot Act. I knew black Muslims got arrested under the Patriot Act. They couldn't call a lawyer, couldn't call nobody. They get out, find out their apartments. They finally get out after 9 weeks. Their apartments had just been taken away. Even if they were evicted, they couldn't show up for any notices within that time because nobody even knew that they were arrested. There was no requirement to inform anybody. Yeah, that's pretty bad. I was put on a government watch list that made it difficult for me to fly. I could do it, but it was made difficult. But then I got a job requiring me to fly regularly. Lost that job. Some of them at the job had figured out that I'm Muslim. I never talked about religion with them, but some of them figured out because I didn't drink and I didn't chase women since I'm a married. I'm now, and I was back then to a different woman, a married man, and I didn't chase women at the job when we were working away from home. They said, no, this. They figured it out. Lost that job soon as Obama won the second election. And he won that election, and I still wound up losing that gig because they were going after you. And when they went after you, remember this, when George Bush, the baby, was running for office, and we black folks that were Muslim and not told you, if you're going to vote for that dude, you're going to put a nail in your own coffin. That man is not going to help you. He will do you the same or he will do you worse, but he will not do you any better than Gore. And guess what the F you all said? You black people complain about racism too much. You black people. Yeah, I'm mocking the accent. And it's not because I hate y'all. It's because you didn't even want to call us people. I know there's no P in Arabic. But see, when you're learning other languages, especially white folk languages, you tend to get that right. When it comes to whites, you'd say whites or white people. Then you turn around with talking to us, black people. Why you don't say the P then? But you know what? Like I said, it's not about hatred. But those of you who had just landed in the States were saying this, and those of you who had grown up and should have known that we were not just complaining about it also said the same thing. And the reason I know about this is because the ones that were teens at that point were telling us what y'all were saying. They were sick of it. Now those teens are adults, and a lot of you that were teens back then telling black folks what the elders were saying, you now were starting to replace them and say some of the same things. And hoping that you can have that little comfortable life accepted by white folk. You can have a comfortable life, maybe, but you have to understand you ain't going to be accepted by white folk, and their rules are going to be the same. You are going to get your start financially at the expense of black folks, and you must sell things that are forbidden in your religion if you're Muslim. That's how they do it. They're going to block avenues off if they can. And if you're able to give your kids a head start, fine, but this is what's going to happen with your kids. In order for them to get that head start because you finally made it, you still have to remember that your ability to make it from the beginning started with you agreeing to go into black oppressed neighborhoods and sell things that are forbidden in your religion. And if you are an Arab Christian, you also weren't supposed to sell those things. Maybe alcohol, but pork? Were you supposed to sell pork as a Christian? especially if you're one of the Orthodox. Were you supposed to do that? No. Were you supposed to sell pornography as a Christian? You were not. Cigarettes, knowing what you were not. So maybe you could say that it was okay if you sold alcohol, but were you supposed to help drunkards stay drunk? No, you were not supposed to do that. And that's what y'all agreed to do in the hood in order to get some money, in order to get ahead. And see, a lot of us don't forget, but several years ago, there was an Arab store owner who chased a young black boy out of his store, shot him dead over some kind of, I don't know if it was a beer or if it was a carbonated beverage, but it was over some bottle of some cold beverage. He chased him and shot that boy dead, walked back to the store with it. People where he shot the boy was in some bushes. So he walked back with the beverage, put it back on the shelf. People thought he just got the beverage back, but then a few days later, they couldn't find the boy until they looked for him and found him in the bushes and realized the store owner had killed him. What the F was that? He shot somebody dead. Now, granted, I don't know that I would have been any nicer if I had a business and people were consistently stealing from me too. But I'm black. If I open up a business in a black area, I'm going to be stolen from, especially if I tell them I'm black. If I lied about where I'm from, maybe not. But if I tell them I'm black and open up a store, oh man. He says he's black, but he's not recognizably so. Oh man, the bums are going to come out of the woodwork. Everybody's not going to participate, but the same bums will do it again and again and again. It would have been harder for me than it would have been for that Arab store owner. I don't think I'd have shot that boy dead. That Arab store owner didn't see the boy as human. And one of the reasons that right now, if I opened up a business in a black area, if I did it right now, one of the reasons that I would catch even more hell than any of you would catch is because if I tell them I'm black, they would say, okay, but he looked like one of them other people that own the stores. We don't trust him. Because that's already beginning to happen sometimes. It's not so bad in the States, but I mean, out here, I'm seeing that. Here in Saudi, I see that if I see somebody black and I don't know. As when I was with my son and people would say, oh, is that your friend? He would say, that's my dad. Then they would take a second look at me, at my nose and lips, and then they were, okay. They give me the handshake and everything. That's when I realized that even outside of Riyadh, black folks are supposed to say hello to each other, that this is a kingdom-wide thing. We're supposed to speak to each other. But it's not just not knowing, but it's this distrust when I reach out to some of my own. That's because of people that look like you, calling us slaves. And then when you go to the US or Canada, and not only that, but I'm going to tell you black folks something about racist Arabs in general, if they're not black. And I'm talking about racist ones. They will do certain things at times, even to black folk that are Muslim from Muslim areas. In Ohio, a bunch of Somali women got together and stomped out an Arab store owner because he disrespected a Somali woman in there, called her a foul name. Her brother defended her. And so he attacked the brother. The brother wound up going to jail. And he never said, you know what, I started this. He was just defending his sister. He never did that. So the cops showed up, well, between a white Arab and a brown and a black African Muslim, which one are they going to send to jail? They sent the boy to jail. So the Somali women, they showed up, and the women, they showed up, didn't even tell the men. They showed up and they took turns stomping that Arab. I remember talking about that years ago. That was unfortunate that it had to happen, but you know what? Those of you that are Muslim, and you ain't black are going to have to start checking your communities for their racism. The exceptions are Southeast Asians that are Muslims. They ain't on that stuff. Some of you want to say, yeah, they are too. I was there. I mean, I've been in one of the countries, but I was there twice. Second time with my wife. Nobody said anything out of pocket that was Muslim. Nobody. The only time I saw someone do something that I could interpret as being racist was a dark-skinned Indian Malaysian woman fussing at a little African-American child. She was African-American. She raised the voice at the child because the child was asking a question. And I remember chiding that lady and told her, don't say nothing back either. Don't answer me. And I had to tell my wife's niece, I'm sorry that you had to see that. I'm sorry about that. See, and that was an Indian lady. I don't know if that lady was Muslim or Hindu. I don't feel for guck. She might as well have been a Hindu. If she had any racism in her, how the hell am I supposed to know? Only racists that I consider to still be Muslims are the ones that know it's wrong and admit that it's wrong. So if they're going to be that way, at least they say, yeah, I'm not right for being this way. I'll accept that they're Muslim. They're crap quality, but I'll accept that they're Muslim. They try to justify it. You disbelieving kafir. Matter of fact, worse, because you're an apostate. You used to believe, then you justified this. You blaspheme against God after you took your shahada. F you. And when you do it, you send a message to the races of people that you can't stand, that if they accept Islam, they're going to take a subordinate position to you. That's a damn lie, but you won't tell the truth. That you take a subordinate position to them. You don't want them to know it. No, they're better than you. The person from the race upon which you look down that then accepts Islam is automatically better than you just by virtue of them not being a racist. But you're the reason there can't be unity. Black folk that are Muslim can't have but so much solidarity with y'all. And we wouldn't mind having it. We'd rather that because we know your enemies are really oppressors. But how much can we afford to, considering two things? Number one, that's not an enemy we could even knock a dent in right now, especially with what we got to contend with. And then number two, you wouldn't do the same thing for us if we needed you to. Not to that extent. You're acting like it's our job to die for you. You'll sit up and look at some of your own people who don't say much about it. Well, he can't say much about it. He's probably helping out in private, and they may be. You'll do that. But then when it's some of us, where are y'all? What do you mean, where are we? We're dealing with our own stuff. We're dealing with a machine, a system that wants to keep everything away from us. And you've decided to co-opt that system and let it co-opt you when you join the States or Canada, because they tell you you can only start a business like this over there. And you say, okay. And you look at the market that will not buy from you if you don't sell things you're not allowed to sell in your religion, and you still sell those things. And I would actually kind of sympathize based on what you'd have to go back to if you didn't make it in the States. I kind of sympathize, but you know what? There are other places you could go where you don't have to do those same things. Latin America. There are many of you that don't go to the States, they go to Latin America. They can get into different businesses. They're doing better. And they don't have to sell alcohol. There are many that go into parts of Africa and start business. They don't have to sell alcohol if they don't want to. And the Africans will even tell you they don't know how to treat us that well. And I'm looking at them like, so you went to Africa and you can't treat the Africans well. You mother. Yeah, y'all are seen as problematic. And those of you that are Palestinian tend to have a bit more sympathy when other people are going through oppression. You tend to have it, and yet and still the amount that you're missing tells everything. It surprises us. We can barely hold our families together because of what the system did. And now we're facing a situation in which we don't have the option to even have families with women that mirror our image anymore. It's not an option anymore. We already knew we couldn't have with white women. Most of us didn't want to anyway. That's for most brothers, the white woman's the last choice or no choice at all. That's what this system managed to do. It jacked us up royally. We are messed up from it and still bouncing back. And you know what? We look at that system and we have to contend with this. And now many of our men, if they're going to start families at all, they're going to have to develop skill sets that will allow them to live somewhere outside of the states, go to these areas, and then stay there with their wives in order to raise a family they can keep together. That's what the hell we are facing right now. And you want to know why it is that we're not putting who you want in the White House. They call it the White House for a reason. You know, first you all thought that it was going to be Baby Bush. Can't have Gore because of his running mate Lieberman. I remember that. Can't do it. Couldn't consider it. Well, what the hell happened under Bush? 8 years. Yeah. Everywhere, not even just in Palestine, but just throughout, period. What the hell happened? Then you got tired of the Republicans after you didn't listen to black folk, but they proved us right. Then you were like, well, Obama's going to change things. And by that point, we had to realize, okay, you know, they're not going to let Obama change anything. For you, where you're concerned, they wouldn't let him. He's already a black president. If he wins the election, they probably ain't going to let him be sworn in. We were shocked when he was sworn in, when he was inaugurated. Now, we were a little bit too happy and a little bit too relieved, and that was our foolishness. But we knew one thing we did understand was that you cannot change certain things. There were certain things we knew we weren't going to get. Most of us didn't think we were going to get reparations. Whites thought we might get it. We knew that's not going to happen. We knew he would have been killed if he had entertained that. And here you were thinking that this election was going to change the foreign policy. That's not going to change the foreign policy. Just like we can't vote the racist out of their position. We can't vote the wealthy out of their wealth. We can't vote the elites out of their elite power. Certain things are not going to be put up for vote. White supremacy is not going to be put up for a vote in a system like this. There's not going to be a vote in which you can vote out white supremacy. There won't be an election like that. It is never up for election. It is a must. It's baked in the cake, and you think you're going to liberate yourselves with votes. We made that mistake already. At least we understood that by voting for Barack, we were going to be loosening the chains a bit. At least we understood that we weren't going to all of a sudden go free, and he had 8 years. The hell did you think was going to happen? We were telling you, I mean, yeah, we'll vote for him, but he can't change the foreign policy. You keep thinking that, I don't know. I mean, when we're telling you what they're like and what they're going to do and how you can't really integrate with them, but so much you don't listen. See, when they call us the N-word, we have a bunch of insults we can say back at them. When they call you the sand N-word, you don't even know how to insult white people. You don't know how to roast them. Oh, black folk, you could roast all day. It's a part of the culture, but you don't know how to roast white folk. Couldn't do it. Even though in some of your cultures, you'll roast really, 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 really light skinned men. Oh, yeah, some of y'all will do that, but you don't know how to roast real white folk after they call you the saying N word. That's part of why we started looking at y'all strange and saying, yeah, we ain't going to help you no more. You got this on your own. We never called you the saying N word. We never called you towel heads or rag heads. We never called you any of the same things that white supremacists would call you until we found out y'all were calling us slaves. We've already tried defending y'all in many cases. When I say y'all, I mean Arabs in general, not only Palestinians. But we tried it already. And at the end of the day, when you had a choice, not between making more money and making less money, or living in a safe neighborhood and living in a dangerous neighborhood, not these things, but when you had a choice between living with white folk and living with us, you chose living with them, integrating with them. You called yourself white. And that's when we started looking and saying, you ain't going to be there for us. And you weren't the only groups to do that. A lot of Latin Americans did that too. Indians did it. Pakistanis did it. And because of this sense of treachery, many black folks came to the notion that they could look at someone and tell if somebody was going to be an ally to them or be loyal to them. And now they're extending that even to black folks that look like me. Because of you. When you all used to tell black folks that look like me, but you're not black, we'd be like, no, we are. And white folk and black folks would agree. It'd just be you that would try to tell us that we're not. Now you're starting to have black folk and white folks agree with you. White folk are glad to say it because they want to lessen our numbers. And then you got black folks that are willing to say that because they don't trust us. No, you're not, because they can't bring themselves to trust people that look like me. Because they can't bring themselves to trust people that look like you. Because you condition black folks again and again and again to believe that even if you follow God's religion, you're not actually going to be an ally to black folks against white supremacist oppressors. That may be why it is that if a Ku Klux, you may have these neo-Nazis and skinheads and Ku Klux Klansmen that will do things to you, but we never hear about you all fighting them. We don't hear about it. No, we got to fight them. That's why it was that in the 80s in London, when white supremacists were going around looking for non-black people to beat up on, they started looking for protection from black folks. Because we know, to a certain extent, even when we don't fully understand it, we understand it better than you. And when we're willing to share what we do know with you, you keep doubting us every time. Because what it means is that you got to start looking at white folk with the same distrust that you now got black folk looking at me with, looking at you with. What you know you would never do on behalf of black folks, white folks wouldn't do half of for you. And we're trying to explain that to you, and y'all like, but. And so you don't want to accept that because you would have to accept that that means they would never do for half of for you what you know you won't do for us. They won't even accept you no matter what you do. If you give up your religion and you retain Arab culture, there's a level past which they would not accept you. You could be an Arab Christian and they wouldn't, because you might become Muslim one day. That's how they view it. They might accept your grandkids if your grandkids don't have an Arab last name and they're light-skinned enough and they're not Muslim anymore. Yeah, then your grandkids will, in fact, assimilate. But at the cost of you losing your religion, which should disgust you, and many times it does. But that's not only it. You got a perpetual tan and dark curly hair, they still ain't gonna be accepted. if your grandkids have the same thing. And some of y'all know that, which is why it is that when you do get stateside in Canada and the UK, if you make some money, first thing y'all try to do, marry a whitey. You marry someone that looks like the Israeli lieutenant that shot your grandmom back home on behalf of the IDF. You'd rather marry someone that looks like that than to marry somebody with a tan darker than yours and hair nappier than yours and a nose wider than yours and lips bigger than yours. And like I said, when it comes to preferences, I'm all for preferences until the preference comes down to the oppressor. That's when I look and I say, no, this is clear cut. Because if you just didn't want sisters, I mean, fine, okay, but Latin American women? No, she's not as good as the Wyatt woman? Really? The one that hates you the most, that looks down on you the most, is the one you consider to be the prize? That's when I start looking at y'all funny. Like, so I mean, you wouldn't consider the Indonesian lady, the Malaysian lady, you wouldn't consider the Sri Lankan lady if she's Muslim, uh, the lady from Bangladesh. No, none of that. That's so you're going to go straight for the woman that most closely resembles who bulldozed your family home back home, and is the reason that you left there to go to the US or Canada or the UK or Australia to make some money. Everybody's looking at you like, really? That's how you do it? I mean, sometimes you even have other groups of people that have the same illness, but they look at you, especially if you're Palestinian, they want to know why you would do that. For what reason? So you want to you prize marrying someone that looks like they're related to the IDF soldiers that came through your street or your neighborhood, arrested people that didn't do anything, shot kids, shot dogs, shot women, shot men. Hmm, that's a trip. I look and I'm like, how does that work? And other people sometimes who have the same issue look at you and they say, well, how does that work for you? Why would you do that? You were trying to phenotypically and visually become your own oppressors. Okay, you don't want to look more like us. All right. That's not quite as big a deal as the fact that you want to look like your own oppressors. And we're looking at each other and we're castigating each other for that, but y'all take it for granted. Like, why wouldn't you? We're looking at each other. A lot of brothers are looking at American and other Western sisters and saying, you're bleaching and you're wearing these weaves and these wigs. You looking like the same woman you telling us to stay away from because she'll get us lynched. She will get us lynched. And you would too. So we're leaving you by. But y'all don't even have that kind of resistance anywhere in your culture. It never crosses your mind. Never do. It never does. Some of your scholars will sit up and say that dreadlocks are haram to wear, but uh, dyeing your hair blonde is not, putting in blue contacts is not, bleaching your skin is not. You never even think to question that. Edward Allen Anderson was right to roast you. He had to. You've had it coming for a while. You didn't really give anybody much choice. And I'm saying this as a man who sympathizes with you and wants you to be free, liberated, and all that. And in actuality, has sympathy for those that are still back there because they don't even have time to think about how they're going to step on us to try to get acceptance from white folk. But when you have left and you've gone somewhere where things are a bit more settled on the surface, you start to accept the terms that they offer. And I don't understand that. Why would you do that? I've seen one man whose father was killed. He didn't get a chance to meet his dad. Never did. This man would get so angry. He was a Palestinian. I assume he's still alive. This man would get so angry when news would come from Palestine. He would throw his head to the sky and start swearing at God. Where are you? When are you? He would do that. But you know what? He was willing to join the U.S. Army later. He had only been married once. And you know who he married? White woman. And we could have told him. I said to him, I remember telling him, listen, you already left her. The marriage is over. But if you had wanted to know how that was going to work out, I could have told you, because it was classically predictable. Her family was against him. And when she decided to leave, they celebrated and took his clothes and burned them in the yard, left him messages on his voicemail calling him a saying N-word. Come get your clothes. Well, they're ashes. But you can keep whatever we don't burn before you get here. I was like, yeah, I could have told you that was what's going to happen. I wasn't telling him he needed to go after sisters. I was just simply telling him that he should have known to stay away from them. But he never understood that resistance comes from not accepting more closely than you're absolutely forced to anything from them, especially what is a choice, which you're not forced to. You don't take that. You don't accept anything about them being better except their level of organization and the infrastructure, which they also got by cheating at our expense. He didn't get it. He didn't understand. I told this man before and after I became Muslim that his enemy was specifically white supremacy. I told him that. I said it's older than Zionism. Zionism came about from it. And that's why they were willing to drop them off over there where you are, because y'all ain't white enough. Told him that. He didn't get it. He didn't listen. He didn't understand. So you will maybe never get it. But until the day you do, you're going to only lose the support you would have had from both black men and black women. You will not gain it. You will not find any increase in it. There are more and more and more of us who don't fibaguk enough to help if we could, and we can't anyway. And there are African American Muslims who aren't willing to step out there for y'all, because your own kids, some of you now listening were the kids that were telling on the elders when you were younger, back in the early 2000s, even the 90s, even the 2010s. Some of you are still the ones that would rat your elders out, even though now you're in your 30s and 40s. And some of you have become those elders. Yeah. Some of you are now sitting up and saying to your kids, listen, when I was a teenager, rap music was cool, it was catchy, but trust me, son, you don't want to listen to the music of the Abid, the slaves. You sit up and say that. Not because it's music, not because it's talentless, not because mumble rap is crap, not because of content, no, because it's the slaves' music. You start talking like Ahmed Metwali, who just blasts black folks and calls us the N-word with the hard ER. And he'll tell you he has black blood. but he wants to try to win and curry favor with the white passport Joes in Colombia, where he goes to buy some punani. He just doesn't like the fact that you got a lot of brothers out there too. I don't know. I guess maybe he ran up in the same chick a second time and found it stretched out. I don't know. He might have assumed that it was a black guy that did that. I mean, I'm sure that we can, but the ones of us who can are being chased down in the United States, don't need to go anywhere, I guess. But when you got to watch out for that. I mean, you're going to have to turn. You not only are you going to have to sit up and say, okay, we're done with the racism. Even if we disagree with black folk about something, we're done treating them worse than we would treat anybody else. And not only are you going to have to stop doing that individually, you're going to have to separate yourselves from the ones who do. You're going to have your own little internal division that is based on that for us to be able to delineate. When your families are divided based on who's not willing to be unfair to black folks versus who will do it, even casually and subconsciously, and won't even oppose this in themselves, won't oppose that kind of training. When your cultures are divided, your families are divided based on this, then we can delineate and say, okay, well, at least these individuals here are allies because of this this particular camp they chose. And even then, that's a stretch. We may just not be able to tell. We may just not be able to know. We're not even asking y'all to come loving us and hugging us all the time. Not even that. Just, you know what? Listen, this is unfair. And we're not going to do this to you. And we're not going to let people do it to you, even if they're related to us, because it's not fair. That's really what we're saying to do. And when you can't change something, you can't. Just like we can't. When we can't, we cannot. Okay, no harm, no foul when you know that you can't. But when you can, you do. If you can tell your elders, fuck the shuck up, stop talking about them in the way that you wouldn't tolerate them talking about you, and in a way, more specifically, in a way you wouldn't talk about white folk no matter what the hell they did, then you started something. Because you've heard your elders, sometimes your elders talk worse about us than they do about the IDF. You know that. And when that happens, it's time to start calling them out. Hey, granddad, you foul for that, right? I'm your grandfather. Yep. And I love you. And since I love you, I'm telling you that you foul for this. Filthy, funky foul for that. Because they don't have anything against you except that they've heard that some of y'all talk like this about them. I've met black Muslims who will only go to masajid that are started and still run and heavily populated by black folk. They don't mind if they see a few non-black folk in a black masjid, but they look for black masajid to go to. They won't go to a masajid that's not mostly black. I've met Muslims like that are black. I'm not talking about NOI when I say black Muslims. I'm talking about they believe that there is one God and this God does not resemble any creation. No father, no mother, no children. And that Muhammad ibn Abdullah, peace be upon him, from 1400 years ago, was the last of a line of messengers and prophets. Black folk like that, and they will sit up and say, I'm not praying behind them because they could be racist, and how would I know? And I know because some of them go to extremes where I've tried to help them to not be too extreme, and they start interrupting me and cutting me off and won't let me finish a sentence. And then before I know it, I'm just a sellout because I look like them, meaning the ones they don't want to pray with. And I'm like, no, it's not that. It's just that when it comes to this particular thing, they're actually right about that. See, there you go. Well, yeah, but they didn't make that up. Their problem is this. You have this problem with them, not that problem over there too. So why stretch it into another problem? I've had There was one guy that straight up said, he straight said, your friend, and he was talking about an Indian man. He said to me, your friend cannot come over here and preach. And I was like, oh, okay, but why? Because he ain't us. Is he going to preach the message that we need? Does he even know what it is? And if he does he care enough? We'll take care of that. We will preach to our people. And I understood. But when I told my friend that his request was denied, my friend nodded his head, raised his eyebrows a bit, and he said, as expected. And he straight told me African American Muslims are very sensitive. And I knew this. What he did not know was that I lost the trust of my own in that particular masjid for a short time because I even so much as forwarded his request to some folks there. I was untrusted for a little while. That was what he didn't know. And that has a, and the thing was that when I said this, it was one guy about as pale as me, recognizable, but about as pale as me. He even had freckles, actually. But he also didn't shave his head, so it was easy to tell he was a brother. And he was the first one to say, nope, 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 no. We're not having nobody else that's not us come to preach to us, and they don't even know what we need to hear. We're not doing that. We'll be nice to him. He's another Muslim. He can pray with us. He can listen when we're preaching. If he's going to preach, he's going to have to preach to his own people. He was the first one to say that. He was not playing around. He was not taking chances. But why did this man have this distrust? I think now you understand. You have a good idea as to why this was. I hope that what I've said helps. But I've preached this message before for years and I haven't heard about any massive changes. And I'd like to thank all of you for listening. As always, black heart, black mind, black out, assalamu alaikum, and black heterosexual non-select male power. Because, sometimes even because people that ain't boom shika don't like it. And black patriarchy until extinction of Judgment Day. Thank you for flying with us here again on Jet Black Airways, where the phrase jet black is also a verb. Keep jetting black with us until the wings and the wheels fall off. Gender justice forever.